Is violence ever justified? In the 15 to 20 minutes that I have your attention, we cannot possibly tackle such a philosophically dense subject. But briefly, let's talk about the protests in Frankfurt, Germany last week, where more than 10,000 people took to the streets to protest the European Central Bank's new lavish headquarters, an all too tangible mockery of the extreme economic policies set forth by the bank. In short, in the name of austerity, aka curtailing government debt, the ECB has taken its Friedman-style, hyper-capitalist, suck-off corporations, fuck-off little people mentality and injected Europe with a deadly dose of dipshit economics. What this really means is slashing public spending, privatizing state-run institutions, fueling unemployment, and napalming all the things we love to give Europe a hard time for, but are just secretly jealous of, like socialized healthcare, vacation time, maternity and paternity leave, strong unions, the little things in life. The euro was designed to do this, and don't take that from me. The guy who dreamed up this little bit of capitalist demon seed says so. It puts monetary policy out of the reach of politicians. And without fiscal policy, the only way nations can keep jobs is by the competitive reduction of rules on business. In other words, remove economic control from elected governments, and unfettered greed will rule. Europe is failing because the euro is succeeding in the exact way it was meant to, at the literal and figurative expense of the people. So how do you raise your voice to the fat cats on high? Too out of reach and out of touch to hear you or care? Is it worth a few burnt police cars when there's an epidemic of young adult suicides in Greece? Can we compare a few overturned blockades to 10,000 families forcibly removed from their homes in the UK? And how do you explain more cuts to public health care when there's already a 200% rise in HIV cases in Greece? Can you be confronted with a $1.3 billion building paid for by cuts to your present, your future, and not fume with anger? Anti-austerity protests have been ongoing for years, with the only response being more cuts, while an all but silent media looks on with little more than a condescending pat on the head for the oppressed masses. But now, these issues have painted the front pages of media worldwide, thanks to a few fires and some clown costumes. People who knew nothing about these issues are learning about them. So perhaps these clowns were what we needed to get serious. Perhaps in this case, violence was justified. And I don't necessarily have the answer here. I don't know if violence was justified in Frankfurt. I know anger was. And I know, having seen cops push, having seen governments push, I know that at some point, you have to push back. Sometimes a riot is what you need. A riot is the language of the unheard, and we cannot look at a riot and condemn it without condemning the injustices behind it. As activist Tazio Mueller said last week in a Democracy Now! Interview, my hope would be, let's not just focus on the burning cars, because in fact what we need to focus on is the ECB and their policies, because they're burning the continent. To the injustices behind the riots, from tweets to marching in the streets, this is Act Out. Welcome to Act Out. I'm Eleanor Goldfield, and this is your tipping point. Whether you're a seasoned activist or someone just peering around the corner of pushing for change, it's highly likely that in this digital age, you've come across a political poster, a graphic of some kind, shouting a message from the confines of two dimensions, asking questions, boldly making statements with imagery and words that ping-pong through your mind for days, months, even years to come. These graphics are art history, our history, and our present. They are cultural expressions of discontent, of concern, of care, of a revolutionary spirit that cannot be chained, beaten, detained, or suppressed. They are an invitation to get involved, not just in a movement, but in your time, your place. They are the continued rise of regular people with a creative mind to do something. And in the sun-bleached streets of Los Angeles, a nonprofit organization is working hard to not only preserve this rise, but to ensure that it will not fall. that the rise will come again, that new waves of new movements, new issues, new people, new places will be inspired by and inspire with political graphics. The Center for the Study of Political Graphics has a vault of over 80,000 political graphics, and growing, from the Russian Revolution to today. And although it may sound like a historically academic endeavor and not much more, Executive Director and founder Carol Wells explains how the center is far more than just an art collection. It is, in fact, the embodiment of creative activism, past and present. Take a look. These events that you do, they're not just history lessons or ways to introduce people to a past that they might not be aware of. It seems like it's also a way to get people involved in activism today. Is that a conscious effort that you're, as an activist yourself, you're trying to bring people into the activist movement with these events?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one of the things I really dislike intensely is the idea of nostalgia. And a lot of people say, "Oh, seeing your posters from the '60s like was a walk down memory lane." That's not the point. And every exhibit, even if it is about something like the '60s, ends with contemporary connection. So every exhibit we keep up to date. So it doesn't just stop at a certain time. There's always a link to now. There's always the message that only people acting can make a difference. And if you don't try to make the world a better place, it's going to get worse faster.
So when people see these images, how can they take that knowledge and then turn that into activism in their own communities and their own lives?
Well, often we will invite community organizations dealing with similar the themes in the exhibit to have tables, to have literature. When we do, for example, we have an exhibit that's been traveling for 3 years now called Prison Nation, the Prison Industrial Complex. And there's a free gallery guide that a grant paid for. And in that gallery guide is a list of national organizations that are doing prison justice work.
So I'm curious with this connection to the now, do you pull a lot of digital posters as well?
We are starting to get digital posters. The problem with most digital posters, and some of them are fabulous, some of them are incredible, most of them are designed low res. And that's really limiting the audience. I mean, not everyone has access to a computer. I will sometimes write to artists and ask, could you do this in a high res? We really want to put it in an exhibit. Um, Sometimes I can't, sometimes I can. So what we are certainly collecting them. That's a long answer to your short question.
How do you feel that the role of political graphics has changed in the past 15 years since the advent of social media?
There's a poster renaissance that's been going on since 2003 or 2002. And I credit George Bush. I don't credit him for much good, but yeah, for contributing to this poster renaissance because nothing gets artists more geared up than an illegal, immoral war. So the Gulf War really got artists moving. But I really also credit the internet because one of the artists never had problems making a poster, but then printing them costs money or time. So I think what the internet has really done is incredibly expanded with and made it easier to distribute. And there's these great websites like Alto Arizona about the Arizona boycott and the immigrant rights, or the Occupy movement, where they were free downloadable posters. They had them high enough res on the computer that you could print your own.
How do you see the role of art contributing to a social or political paradigm shift?
Well, art is really the most powerful tool we have, and I think that's one of the reasons they're cutting art and music out of schools because they don't want this powerful tool in the hands of too many people, especially people who are underserved in every other way. Um, a gun can change your behavior, but it can't change your heart and your mind, and that's what art can do. Art can reach out. It can put you in somebody else's shoes. It can make you laugh. It can make you cry, and it can really transform your consciousness. So art is extremely powerful. And but obviously and this is the people in power know that's how powerful art is. That's why they try to marginalize it. That's why the U.S. government and the CIA were promoting abstract expressionism in the 50s as a tool in the anti-communist movement. So that they know how powerful art is. The rest of us have to figure it out because the information is denied us. And there's never been a viable movement for social change without the arts as central to that movement. You cannot imagine the civil rights movement without the music. They made a few posters, but primarily it was the music. I mean, what an incredible thing. Thousands of people holding hands, singing "We Shall Overcome" or "We Shall Not Be Moved." And the poster renaissance, really, the Cubans started doing it pretty early. The Black Panther Party did it. The Vietnam War era really was when the poster renaissance. There was clearly a poster movement going back, World War I and World War II. The US government was making posters. Every government in the world was making posters. After the 50s, TV became a more cost-effective way of reaching people with government propaganda than making posters. So and that used to have the government really gearing towards TV and the corporate press for getting their propaganda out. And then you had the whole McCarthy era where anybody making political posters critical of the government, they lost their job, they were blacklisted or worse. So you really had in the United States I think a whole generation of cultural workers was pretty much either pushed underground or terrorized into silence. And it wasn't until really the Vietnam War, the civil rights movement, that you started having a lot of activity that was and the revitalization of the arts to help promote that message.
And what do you think caused that revitalization? And do you think that something like that is possible now, even though, as you said, education of the arts has gone down significantly, and it doesn't seem like the arts are really something that's promoted in our society anymore?
All I know is that we just had a young man that I'd never heard of walk in the door the other day with a stencil poster about Michael Brown, and it was like it knocked my socks off because it was so incredible. Artists are just really they're brilliant, they're creative, and they have their finger or their paintbrush or their computer on the pulse of what's going on. So the art that's out there is just incredible, and the computers really can help disseminate it.
For more information on the center, visit the site where you can hear about ongoing exhibits, rent or request an exhibit, donate posters, volunteer, and see some of the graphics already in their vaults. Moving on, let's take that inspiration to do something and point it at a worthy target. Climate change deniers and their dark money sugar daddies are on this week's Low Life Scum segment.
You low life scum.
So in case you hadn't heard, climate change is definitely happening. Over 97% of scientists agree that climate change is not only occurring, but is due to human activities. Now, before I dive into this tar pit of denial and dark money, let's go ahead and debunk a favorite argument, if you can call it that, of the climate deniers. I'm not a scientist. Well, I'm not a scientist, so I can't really speak to the validity of this whole climate change thing. Question. So what if 97% of doctors tell you that you have cancer, and that you'll definitely die if you don't stop smoking and snorting tar sands? Do you just put on a happy turtle face and say, I'm not a doctor, so I don't know if I can believe what you're telling me right now? No, of course not. You fucking listen to the experts because it's their job to be experts in that field and tell you when some shit is up. And some shit is definitely up. In light of this, you might wonder, common sense, why aren't we doing everything we possibly can to fix it? Why aren't we stopping this oil, greed, and ignorance-fueled suicide? Well, because the nutbags and asshats in control of mass media and, unfortunately, in control of Congress don't want to. They'd rather quote the Bible as evidence than face up to reality. Same guy brought a snowball into Congress to prove that global warming is a hoax. Hey, dickface. Just so you know, we're experiencing record cold winters because global warming is causing ice caps to melt, thereby flooding the jet streams with cold water, thereby fucking with our weather patterns, for example, record snowfall, gifting you with the ability to flaunt your inexplicable, inexcusable ignorance on television. The scary thing, though, is that this Bible-thumping, snowball-throwing lunatic is not in the minority. 56% of our current Congress thinks that climate change due to human activity is bullshit. Meanwhile, according to NASA's senior water scientist, California has 1 year of water left. The Southeast has been and will continue to be shellacked by superstorms. Food supply is down, prices are up due to extreme drought across the country, and water levels are rising, leaving coastal cities in the day after tomorrow zone, just to name a few. And while I have no doubt that those 56%ers can be dumbasses all on their own, mainstream media and a handful of lawmakers and even scientists have turned their backs on the climate change realities due to bucket loads of cash. According to a 2013 study by environmental sociologist Robert Brull, between 2003 and 2010, $558 million has been funneled into climate change denial organizations, in large part via dark money. So what does this mean? Well, take this for example. Between 2003 and 2007, both ExxonMobil and Koch Industries gave huge sums of money to climate change denial efforts. Then, in 2008, they disappeared. Simultaneously, a huge increase in funding to denial efforts came via Donors Trust, an organization that prides itself in keeping funders anonymous. So as Brull puts it, without a free flow of accurate information, democratic policies and government accountability become impossible. Money amplifies certain voices above others and, in effect, gives them a megaphone in the public square. It'd be like every time you walk outside, someone's yelling at you about how gravity's a hoax, a liberal lie to keep us all down, literally. Meanwhile, everyone else, who knows that that's bullshit, can't make it past the mounds of cash and corporatized media buy-ins to tell you that that guy is a fucking nutter. In other words, there are billionaires and multinational corporations out there secretly paying people like scientist Wei Hawk, aka Willie Soon, to come up with bogus explanations as to why our climate is warming, or forcing legislation that makes it illegal to use the words climate change. I'm not kidding. Florida, North Carolina, Louisiana, and Tennessee, you get honorable mentions this week. And those same billionaires and corporations continue to rape and pillage our dying planet just to avoid having to shift their business models towards renewable energy. Because seriously, wind turbines are fucking ugly. And I guess oil spills are just gorgeous. So it is with ease and great disgust that I give climate change deniers and their dark money funders this week's Low Life Scum Award.
You low life scum.
In order to get involved in the efforts to stop climate change deniers from poisoning our minds and planet, visit forecastthefacts.org and 350.org. You can also get some sleek info cards to bring to a family gathering or ironically place outside of a church via Occupy.com. Now, as a reprieve, grab a cup of tea and let's head to our new segment this week and get cozy. I am a big proponent of the many facets and mediums of activism. It's not all hunching over a computer, mainlining coffee, and crying into a glass of scotch that the world is over. Although I can say that coffee and scotch pairings should definitely be a thing. Sometimes activism is about curling up in a chair with a good book or a good movie and getting cozy. So in the name of coziness and furthered activism, I'm bringing you books and movies to dive into while wearing a Snuggie and eating popcorn. This week, I recommend This Changes Everything by Naomi Klein. This book shifts the paradigm from thinking about climate change as a fault of just carbon to the fault of our crooked capitalism, our addiction to a system that bleeds people and planet in the name of profit. While she outlines the inconvenient truths behind climate change, she offers up this convenient truth. We can do something about it. Activism is our only hope. Without getting too Star Wars on you, I'd like to also point out that scientifically speaking, not just philosophically, activism is our only hope. Yep, scientist Brad Werner actually designed a scientific model that showed that our entire economic paradigm is a threat to ecological stability, and indeed that challenging this economic paradigm through mass movement counter-pressure is humanity's best shot at avoiding catastrophe. So goddamn, science not only says that climate change is real, but that our only hope to counter it is through mass movements. What better way to segue into this week's Frontline segment? So with the writing on the wall, let's throw some writing on our own walls and post to spread the word about climate change and the realities facing our pale blue dot. There are several organizations fighting to stop climate change, dealing with a variety of issues inside the environmental movement. And this is a good thing. It's kind of like an activism buffet. You can pick and choose which specifics you want to tackle, mix them up, get a nice little sampler platter of ways to stop the destruction of our planet. From endangered species to fracking wells, from nuclear waste to the continent of plastic currently occupying part of the Pacific Ocean. Here are some sites where you can dive into the rising waters of climate change. Engage via petition signing, donating, or signing up for an action. From tweets to marching in the streets. Here are sites to check out, followed by some memes to share. That's our show this week. Thank you so much for watching. This last slide will be all the sites that I mentioned, including a link to help support Occupy.com. We are a donation-run organization, so anything you can contribute is hugely appreciated. Be sure to follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and subscribe on YouTube. Good night, and act out.